She was now part of history, and a copy of the melody of a complex instrumental trio. Her skin, like exquisite marble, recreated a unique look of whiteness that surpassed even the freshest snow. She should forge ahead. That curse would serve as her sword and shield until things returned to normal. The girl, to earn extra money, is passionately engaged in creating comic books. If she had a choice, she wouldn't want her life to be cut short by sleep deprivation. She's Amy Melvin, and this is the tale and transformation of an unsleeping Deposna girl into a little miss. If the events do not develop according to the rules of the story, she may lose her mind and go crazy. But there, for the first time, a handsome, fair-haired butler appeared and greeted her. Personal butler Dean, dedicated to his service and concerned for his mistress's welfare, asked about whether she had slept well last night. Then there's the best dreaded brother, Alan Melvin, who was the only Sam twin. He was born into the world to be her knight, so he pledges to keep her safe. And finally Ash, he is an incredibly strong warrior. Now she didn't understand how she could live with them under the same roof. Zhang Qinglin sat at her desk and continued to draw a comic book. She was a middle school student and a freelance comic book artist. Suddenly, her assistant knocked on her door and asked if she could bring her medicine. The artist asked the assistant to leave it on the table, as she was almost done, and thanked her for it. The assistant did not realize that the master was not afraid of sudden death due to loss of strength, because she had been painting continuously for more than 20 hours. Suddenly, Qinlin received a notification on her phone. She said that she hadn't noticed that so much time had already passed. She suggested her assistant go take a nap first. She immediately replied that it was the master who should rest more. She was afraid that one day she would lose her legs if she did not stop torturing her body. Qinling said that Qinling had always taken great care of her, even though she was younger, and then added that her immune system was actually weak from birth. But suddenly, in just a few seconds, the girl's outer peace was disturbed when she suddenly started a coughing fit and drops of blood started to protrude on her lips. The assistant immediately ran up to her and asked her to get ready and hurry up to take her pills, and then they would go to the hospital. She kept asking if Master could hear her. Qinling only slowly closed her eyes and completely fell into darkness. She fell unconscious. Duke Melvin's palace. Capel Empire. When she first woke up, she felt slightly sick and disconnected from the world. She didn't understand who she was, where she was, or why. She wondered what had happened. Suddenly, her butler Dean greeted her and asked if she was feeling sick or what. Amy, unable to cope with the unexpected moment, decided to express her worry and fear. Using her natural instincts, she decided to kick him and screamed at him not to come any closer to her. She must be missing something. It looks like she has become the villain of her own comic book, or rather the little girl in a family of rich people. This story is created by her hands and tells the story of the meeting between the Deus Ex Machina of the Moonflower Kingdom and Prince Capel. Any stories without antagonists are very boring and dry, because for every good there must always be evil. The main villain, Amy Melvin, is the absolute opposite of the protagonist, has a deceptive appearance and high status in social circles because of her father, the Duke. She is ready to go to any dastardly deed for the sake of achieving the goal, even if the mind and body are broken and hands are stained with sin, nothing will stop her. Eccentric and cruel, beautiful and dangerous, once all of this whippersnapper's affairs are revealed, she will go insane and commit suicide, ending the story. Amy Melvin is exactly like that, but Qinlin, who becomes Amy's heroine, is not like that. She asks for help, because what's the point of making her a character like that? She can't think of a better way to act. The little girl asked about who he was, to which the butler replied that he was her humble servant, Dean. He asked her why she would ask such questions when she already knew. Amy, realizing her unfortunate reaction and wanting to ease the tension of the moment, sincerely apologized. She made an effort to express her sincerity, adding that she was actually seeing this man for the first time. Dean was so stunned by what had happened that his reaction was like being petrified, and he simply lost his balance and fell. The sudden event left him in a state of shock and incomprehension, causing him to freeze in place and only then realize what had happened. In her touching appeal to him, she begged him with one single request, not to faint, the kind of thing that would make even a bird frightened. The butler asked permission to start by combing her hair and washing her. Amy agreed, as long as he didn't cry. Then Mr. Dean finally got himself together. In the original comic book version, he was Amy's personal butler, and when the character's own work began to take care of her, she began to have a very strange feeling of unease. Although he managed to fool him, but there was a whole series of challenges ahead. The study on the first floor of the Duke of Melvin's mansion. Dean asked Alan to try and stay calm afterward. He said that Amy apparently has amnesia, and all she had in her head was anxiety. Some people who seem to be thick-skinned are actually panicky. She decided to keep silent. Meanwhile, the young master's memory download continued. The smooth environment was suddenly disrupted when he jumped up abruptly, creating a sudden surge of energy in space. The little girl's reaction was equally sudden, for such an unexpected movement made her flinch, expressing her surprise and slight frightened state. The young gentleman, feeling a rush of tenderness and joy at meeting his sister, approached her resolutely, opening his arms in a desire to give her warmth and comfort. He asked her about the fact that she wouldn't leave him, even though she had amnesia. It was too much for her. She screamed so much that the bird quickly got earplugs after the first time. My brother cried, he apologized, and explained that she had been in a coma for a few days and woke up, and he got excited and couldn't help himself. The over-emotional reaction that was caused by the situation was unusually strong and unjustified in the opinion of others. Dean, feeling responsible for sharing information with his host, asked how they should share the information they had received. Babe didn't understand what it was about yet. Alan replied that it was no trouble to talk to him. One could not worry. For the most important thing was that Amy was all right. Her brother pecked and stroked her cheeks. They were sweetly pleased with each other. Suddenly, Amy shuddered. For a moment, she thought she had fallen under the spell of a very beautiful face. The little girl, suddenly sensing some degree of surprise or possible danger, brushed aside her brother's hand with a slight movement and stepped aside. She hid behind Dean and kept thinking that she had so far supposedly memory loss. It seems that her relationship with this cute boy is very good and close, with no idea how to act in response. She kept hiding, much to Dean and Alan's surprise. Amy didn't understand if they were going to see what happened. She didn't understand why looking at him made it seem like they were seeing each other for the first time. Alan was worried. It dawned on her. Alan Melvin, he is Amy's twin brother. At this point, he, who is a character in the original memoirs. She was sent away at her own 12th birthday feast. The celebration nearly turned tragic. She didn't realize what the devil was now, what strange things were going on. Conscience stabbed her right in the heart. Alan asked that she didn't remember him at all, her big brother. The little girl was at a loss for words at what was happening. She mentally asked for help, because she didn't even know what to say and didn't understand why she couldn't just run away. She turned around and started running, saying that she had other things to do, so she would be the first to leave. Free her legs and run. Sometimes a proper retreat isn't a shameful act at all, but an effective way to escape from problems. Dean looked at the way the mistress ran away and thought about that incredible speed. Well worth it, as for a young mistress. Alan turned to Dean and informed him that the master had already returned. The corridor on the first floor of Duke Melvin's mansion. All that could be heard down the corridor was the stomping of a little girl running. Amy kept wondering why she felt like she was in her own old-fashioned comic book, starring Mary Sue. There was no way she'd ever written such a cliched script in her life. Suddenly, she bumped into someone. He asked her to be more careful. The little girl apologized, for she didn't mean to at all. That man asked about whether she could be blamed, such a precious little princess baby. Amy didn't realize who else he was. The man asked about if she was all right, for she looked tired. Gorgeous, delightful. He was painted completely differently from the others. She had never seen or portrayed this character before. It was a premium class. Amy turned to him and asked who he was, just needing to say the name. He touched her forehead. She didn't realize what the strange, murderous aura was. Duke turned to Kano. He was filled with the urge to smash everything around him. The maid came in. Amy didn't understand where the new face was coming from, where they were coming from. He asked her to get Dean and Alan for him because he wanted to ask them something. Everyone was already there. It was wonderful. Then the Duke decided to get to the point. He asked them to explain why his own daughter didn't recognize him and what had happened during his absence. Amy sat fidgeting behind that man and didn't understand the reason why the situation had become so tense. There was an ominous aura wafting from that man behind her. She realized that the grown man had called her a daughter and that the gentleman was her father. She glanced at him discreetly. Amy was shocked that he was so young. It was unbelievable. A dumbass who didn't have time to introduce this character into the manuscripts. Alan exhaled. Capel, the royal lineage. Amy had suddenly disappeared from the estate a few days ago. She had been unconscious by the time they found her, and had only woken up a couple hours ago. Dean and his brother continued to stare at the young mistress. She didn't realize what they were staring at. She had barely entered her new life and didn't know a thing. The young master continued to stand and fidget nervously. His father continued to stare at him intently. Although the gentlemen present were silent, an awkward atmosphere hung in the air. Amy only felt pressured and mentally kept asking for help. She really wanted someone to get her out of this nightmare. Her condition was noticed by Kano. The servant thought the mistress was too nice. She held out her hands to her. She didn't understand how such stupid dorks didn't realize that it was not okay to say such things in the presence of a little lady. She took her in her arms and apologized, then explained that my lady needed rest and they could consult alone for now. Kano thought the little girl must have been very upset. Duke Fanir asked what the matter was for and asked that she bring his little girl back. Kano asked him to concentrate on his business and discussions. Kano's maid is her goddess. Kano announced that they would be the first to leave, smiled a final victorious smile, and the doors closed. All the men present, experiencing a pleasant feeling of ease and joy in dealing with the little princess, bade her farewell in an atmosphere of merriment. As soon as the doors closed, there was a momentary indifference and gloom. Fanir asked if, in his absence, Capel had really decided to break the law by resorting to kidnapping. Dean explained that it would have been fine if that party had acted decisively, but unfortunately the situation was exactly the opposite. Alan was in the middle of his thoughts. The young master said that this time the lady had not been kidnapped by the royal family, but had disappeared without a trace in broad daylight, and he was afraid that that person was probably involved. The Duke said that he would take Amy to the palace for a couple of days because he wanted them to talk to him in private. Fanir thought that this is a misfortune because Amy is still alive, but then who is the child who died instead of her? And the image of Chin Lin appeared. Amy thanked the maid for getting her out of there. Kano asked her to call her by her first name. The little girl noticed a small wing by the maid's hair. She wanted to touch it very badly. So she did. Kano immediately made it known that her ears were not to be touched. She apologized for that and explained that she thought it was just a piece of jewelry on her head. But just then she realized it was a body part. Kano explained that she's not human, so they're different. While it's expected that there are other races in a different world, it's amazing to what extent. It seems she finally realized one thing. Instead of passively waiting, it's better to take the initiative herself. It's time to explore the new world. Capel, Market Street, District 2. Amy still can't believe the scenes she's been drawing have now come to life, becoming a reality. Just like taking a trip abroad. Except she didn't understand why the butler was with them either. A while ago. Amy approached her brother. Alan asked if she wanted to go for a walk. He explained that of course he could, but he couldn't leave his place yet, and Kano and Dean had left the estate for a while, and his brother was busy. Suddenly, Dean showed up and said it wasn't true, and asked if they were looking for him. He promised to give the young mistress an unforgettable traveling experience. Somehow, and suddenly the urge to go outside was gone. Dean asked about the fact that it was the first time Amy had approached him by herself. The little girl didn't understand what was wrong with them. Gloomy, upset Alan, who had been persuaded, said that he was obliged to keep a very close eye on her, and if the little sister was dissatisfied or upset, he could consider his days numbered. Dean understood. He asked permission to take the lady out on a date and show her all the joys of shopping. End flashback. Dean handed the little lady a scone and asked if she would try it. The little lady thanked him. She started to eat and kept thinking that Mr. Dean is quite nice and cute. She couldn't match his whipping enthusiasm. Dean asked the lady to wait for him for a while, because a new dessert stall had recently opened up in the sleepy house. He wanted to get one for her. He was going to eat it, or he was just going to eat it. He told her not to go anywhere because he's going to fly off and come back. Amy said he was too windy. Although the world is beautiful enough, the atmosphere is cozy. Cultural differences aside, very much like modern times. She continued eating her scone as she heard a scream. Amy didn't know what had happened, though she was startled, but continued to savor it. The lady who screamed reported a brash, inconsiderate commoner. The guy apologized to her, to which the lady reported that he had soiled her dress. The guy fell to his knees and kept apologizing. The lady begged him to let her go. In a moment of deep remorse and inner anguish, he, with a heavy heart and tears in his eyes, relentlessly resorted to begging for forgiveness out of a sincere desire to escape the imminent threat of death. Amy, who was watching this picture, and all thought that the guy was strange, because he reacted as if the noble lady was intimidating him. Although in fact he was the one who grabbed her dresses, maybe he was just trying to ask for compensation. Suddenly, the guy had grabbed Amy's dresses and was now begging for mercy. She didn't realize that he wasn't mistakenly eating around a bunch of adults, so why did she suddenly decide to turn to her for help? Maybe because she was dressed so plainly. After all, she didn't look much like an aristocrat. She wondered if that man was headed for her. The lady kept saying that it was outrageous, but she noticed that next to this commoner, it was her. It was curious to her. She wondered if she was the fool of the Duke's family. The lady came up to Amy and said that this shabby rags suited her very well. Amy didn't understand where the lousy outfit was coming from, and then replied that anything was better than her cabbage outfit. The lady kept trying to digest this information. She informed her that it was Mrs. Cabbage and called her a rude, tasteless idiot. Amy asked if she had something urgent or not. Meanwhile, the guy decided to take off in a huff. The lady kept saying that after what happened, Amy had become a puppet who could only watch in a daze, and then asked why she should not challenge her, or she would just keep quiet like a stray dog again. Amy asked what family she was from for too many words. She was actually wondering who she reminded her of that mean girl. Baney asked what she meant, and then said that whoever she was a rising star of society. The dreaded daughter of Viscount Bailed. She only said it once and she won't say it again. We don't need more. As soon as she began to speak, Amy noted that her voice was very loud. The basic course is the socialite. In this world, the position in society from high to low is as follows. First Duke, then Marquis, followed by Earl, then Viscount. Well, and the lowest is Baron. The status of Duke Melvin is naturally much higher than that of Viscount. Amy was from the Duke's family. The little girl didn't understand what Baney was so proud of, just an evil little girl. Amy sighed and kept thinking that it didn't matter all that much, just an ignorant asshole trying to scare her. She, determined and eager to share her perception, set about demonstrating to Baney what real villains looked like. Duke Melvin's office. Alan kept sitting there wondering how Amy was doing. Before she lost her memory, it was as if she was empty inside, a fool, letting others manipulate her like a puppet. Now she is more energetic, but he continues to worry out of habit, still unable to stop worrying. Alan decided to calm his anxiety and get back to his public service, or whatever it was, to business. Baney asked what the lady had said, and added that she shouldn't think that such a nonchalant look would frighten her. Amy turned to Miss Bailed and said that she thought she was trying to scare her, and then added that her position was much higher. Her family's status was no comparison to who she was and who Miss was. She put her hand on her shoulder and continued to press on with the question of whether Miss was prepared to face the consequences for such disrespect. This sudden and intense exposure to information caused Miss Bailed not only extreme surprise, but also some degree of shock. Bainey pushed Miss away with words of forgiveness and a request that she not come near her again. She promised never to hurt Amy again. The little mistress didn't even move. Bainey ran off with words about Amy not forgetting her name. Amy only watched Miss Bailed run away and noticed how she turned as red as a boiling kettle. She didn't realize that she had just run away, leaving her in such a stupid position, or what. This all happening was watched closely and with interest by Ash. He was staring into the events with his gaze, penetrating into the essence of what was happening like an observer, noticing the subtle nuances and details. Ash thought that luckily that kid wasn't evil, but he didn't understand where Dean was and why he wasn't accompanying Miss. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed the butler and that kid. The boy recanted that he'd done everything his master, Dean, had asked him to do to provoke a conflict between the two young ladies, but it hadn't worked out. Dean replied that nothing. He'd done a good job, but now things were a little more complicated, because little Amy wouldn't be as obedient as before. The butler remarked that he was discovered by the little loyal knight, and then asked that he couldn't kill him anyway, could he? As long as Amy Melvin is alive, as long as she's breathing, there's absolutely nothing Ash can do until her life is cut short. The guy who started the ruckus said he'd better go. Dean asked him to go, because if he didn't leave right away, he wouldn't be able to later. Ash wanted to attack Dean, but his shield went off. The butler asked him if he was the rumored guard dog of the Melvin family, or false knight, and then asked him which name Ash liked better. Ash told him to shut up, because he was a mutt of the Imperial Capel family, and it was obvious that he had no good intentions, so Dean should refrain from doing anything stupid. The butler said that he thought he would praise him, and then offered to talk about life next time, because Miss was probably waiting for his return. Amy stood waiting for Dean. She didn't understand why he was still there. Suddenly Dean appeared and apologized for keeping her waiting. Mistress asked him why he hadn't come for so long, where the bread had gone, and if he hadn't gone for sweets. She noticed something and asked him to duck a little. He did so. She ran her hands over his face, moved his hair a little, and wondered where the wound had come from. Meanwhile, while attention was focused on what was happening, and the cause of the injury was in the shadows, standing nearby behind the wall, Dean explained that he'd met a puppy on the way that had tried to take his food away from him, and then took her hand and kissed it, asking her how she was worried about him, and how she could be so nice. Amy actually appeared shocked. Her face reflected not only outward uncertainty, but also an inner turbulence of emotion. The butler stroked her cheek with words to the effect that it was the safety of the lady's unlovely face that was paramount. He looked in Ash's direction. Ash was just watching this picture with thoughts of him letting her go. Total resentment. Dean only thought, what a funny little guy. The butler informed then it was getting late and they should get back, for tomorrow was an important schedule. Bainey ran down the narrow street, thinking how embarrassing it was that it was obviously the other side of Amy. She remembered the image of the young mistress, and how could she not agree that she was very beautiful? She didn't know what to do next with the task her father had given her, if this was the way things were going. Something rustled in the dark alley. Bainey was startled when she saw the silhouette. Viscount Bailed asked what the servants wanted to say, that his daughter, after meeting with Miss Melvin, had disappeared or what. Bainey, his little girl, she's a child his father is so very proud of, she's given him a chance to get close to Amy in no time. He decided to think when he had better settle accounts with the Melvins. Late at night, Amy went out for some fresh air and wondered who was in charge of her comic book now. She doesn't know what's going on in that world at this point. She looked down and wondered if she could get back up if she jumped off the 3rd floor. Mistress didn't know if she should try because she didn't belong there, so she climbed to the balcony. Suddenly, Alan appeared. He grabbed her and told her that it was dangerous, and she had to come down immediately. Sitting together on the floor and holding hands, Amy asked her brother if he was angry with her. He replied briefly that he was, because what could have been if he had been late? Amy apologized and promised that she wouldn't do such dangerous things again, so he should continue to hold her with his trembling hands. She's not someone he really cares about. Day 2. Dean opened the curtains in the young mistress's room and informed her that it was time for her to get up, for she had to go to the palace to meet His Majesty. Sleepy M still didn't fully understand the whole situation at first. Dean asked about the little gentleman. Didn't he tell her that yesterday? It only took a second to move her from the bed to the mirror. His skills really are amazing. Flashback to when Alan stopped Amy. He tried to stop her from jumping off the balcony last night and was probably too scared and forgot to tell. Dean informed her that she would have a bodyguard her age assigned to her, so she didn't have to worry. He was already waiting for her outside the door, so she should get ready. Amy walked out of the room and met up with Ash. She wondered how such a child and is a guard of the Lord. Ash greeted the young mistress, introducing himself. She asked him to stand up. This character was not in her comic book. Ash listened to her and obeyed. As soon as she saw his eyes, she was amazed at his heterochromia. Thank goodness he's so handsome. Suddenly she felt that unkind look on her. Turning around, she looked out the window and saw that bird there looking right at her. At the same time, in another country, Huayue, High Management Bureau, Chen Qiuyi was standing with a pair of scissors and cut off her hair. She thought it was very pretty, and she was really good at it. Even if she cut her hair, she would still be a beauty. She was asked if she had packed her luggage because the boat had arrived in Capel. Qiuyi replied that she had and was ready to leave at any time. She was reminded that she was not going there to play games. She must remember her mission. Chen Chu asked not to worry, as she can be relied on. She needs to catch the monsters that escaped to the neighboring countries. Chen sat and thought that the goal of this mission was Xunyao. She wondered if similar mutants were found in other countries. It was a curious thing. The boatman turned to the girl and ordered her to descend quickly as it was dangerous. He didn't understand how she had gotten up there. The little girl apologized. The boatman said they were there. The country the whole world is talking about is Capel. Capel, a country famous throughout the world for the power of Mura. The locals believe in light and freedom, but the source of this belief has a violent past. 500 years ago, through the efforts of the Capel family, the gods Yumang and Shanyuedong overthrew a ruling dynasty that was mired in fraud and tyranny. After many generations, the current ruler of this country is Reggio Capel. Sitting in the carriage, Amy kept thinking about the fact that they know about this country only in general terms. But once there is a realization that everything is much more complicated. Her father couldn't wait to share his joy with his daughter, and with excitement in his voice he turned to her, stating that here they had finally arrived at their destination. Here it was, the ruling family of Capel. Little Amy is a little nervous. Viscount Bailed appeared, who kept asking Malwyn as soon as they arrived for them to bring her back, as they had taken his precious daughter. The guards asked the Viscount to calm down. Mr. Bailed kept saying that his daughter disappeared after meeting Amy. He kept saying that it was her fault, and all because the young mistress hates her. This was all being watched by Ash, who was just thinking if their whole family was equally brainless or what. Mr. Bailed kept saying that he wanted their whole family to pay for this and started to invoke magic, the power of Mura. He was told to stop. The Duke made a defense in time and started saying that kind of thing in front of the palace itself, quite ingenious. It was only a pity that he had messed with the wrong person. Mr. Bailed was shocked by the appearance. Fanir applied magic on Mr. Baeld's hand, which he used for magic. The Duke ordered the guards to take him away. Meanwhile, Ash was helping Amy to come to her senses. She was still trying to realize that the man wanted to attack her, and that it was the power of the Mura that was so powerful, how she wanted to go home to her mom. The guards began to lead the Lord away. Racken thought it went just fine. They would see each other next time. They would just have to wait. In the royal reception hall, Lord Reggio Capel, in full accordance with his status, stood by the table, tapping rhythmically on its surface. At the same time, Fenir, looking like a true paragon of elegance, was enjoying tea while seating himself comfortably. Meanwhile, little Amy, despite her inner tension, diligently maintained her outward composition, not allowing any doubt to show on her face. Reggio, beginning his remarks, remarked that it was the first time the Duke had appeared to them with his daughter, implying that she would now be a member of their circle. He then turned to the little girl, asking her if he could address her by the name Amy, symbolizing some new stage in their relationship. Feeling her father's touch on her sleeve, Amy moved closer to him, showing her affection and loyalty. This gesture reflected not only her respect for her father, but also her willingness to support him in any circumstance. At this time, the ruler had already begun to use his magical abilities, laying questions on her and awaiting answers. Amy, though she could feel the tension in the air, tried to remain calm and answer the questions posed with dignity, showing her confidence and determination. The little girl felt a tremendous pressure. For some reason, raising her eyes to him and answering would be more frightening than death. But not answering the king was not allowed, was it? She didn't know what to do. The Duke covered his daughter's eyes and explained that she was a lady and asked the king not to be like that. The little girl happily hugged her father's arm. Reggio asked if the young lady would accept his sincere apology, for he was sorry. The king asked if she would forgive him, or if the little girl wanted to snuggle against his broad chest. Fenir turned to Reggio and gave him a second to move away from his daughter. The door to the waiting room. Amy kept thinking how frivolous this was. Her character and Reggio are too different. Her gentle, handsome. She didn't understand why he turned into a smiling tiger. No need to ruin her character. Ash asked all the while she was wondering what was next. He asked her if she was okay. Amy thought he wouldn't understand the loneliness of an author from another world. Amy replied that nothing was wrong and suggested he take a walk. In the gloomy interior of the king's study, the Lord suggested that there was a transmigration of souls, or the transmigration of the soul into a new, free body. This phenomenon, he said, could be compared to the return of the spirit to Amy's child, who remains the same despite the change. Amy, present in the study, listened attentively to the king's words. After he expressed his thoughts, she turned to Ash, wanting to know if he had heard the same things she had. Ash, answering Amy's question, explained that because of the powerful soundproofing inside the palace, he couldn't make out what was being said outside the walls of the study. His answer confirmed that no sound vibrations reached his ears. Influenced by the king's words, and then Ash's response, Amy began to wonder if she had imagined the sounds. She wondered what had happened, and began to doubt the veracity of her perceptions. But suddenly she heard them talking again, so it wasn't imagined. Fenir informed her that the king knew that he had not brought her to him to confirm her identity. The king asked what it was about. Liliana's prophecy, only one child is destined to survive. He could bring little Amy. That would mean his child would have to be fiercer than the others. Fenir asked Reggio if he believed this statement. Reggio replied that the Duke was a ruthless man, to which Fenir asked him not to interrupt, and then proceeded to say that he was looking for a way to break the curse, and then asked about what the king was doing. The ruler asked the Duke what he thought, that he thought he had done something to that girl, or what. Reggio asked to be sure. It's a fake with low survivability. She only cares about him, the Duke. The only survivor will be his child, not Amy Melvin. As she strolled down the corridor, she felt a little lost, not quite grasping the meaning of the conversation going on around her. Compared to the content of the comic book, where every frame was overflowing with information and details, the everyday reality seemed too simple and uninformative. Amy, turning to Ash, suddenly froze as if mesmerized by the instantaneous event that happened before her eyes, making her forget the current situation for a moment. Meeting Shunyao's gaze as he watched them through the window, Ash realized that something was wrong and instantly felt a surge of anxiety. In the comic book, the scene with the appearance of the bird occurred much later than it did in real life. The young mistress, puzzled as to how the bird ended up where she saw it, had a hard time understanding how this unexpected detail fit into the overall course of events. She felt that there was something deeper and more mysterious behind this strange encounter. The bird stared at Amy for a long moment, one moment, and the window cracked and burst open. When Ash sensed the approaching threat, he reacted instantly, shielding Amy with his body, trying to create a shield for her from the potential danger. The young lady's face turned to the knight with an expression of confusion and concern as she turned to him to ask for help, sincerely hoping for his protection and support in this difficult moment. The ringing of a shattered emerald bouncing off the floor was like a musical note in the dark symphony filling the room. Raising his eyes, Ash turned to Miss Amy, ready to act on the circumstances and ensure her safety. In that instant, seeming like an eternity, the young lady continued to fall downward, plunging deeper into the darkness of the unknown, coming face to face with the unknown and danger. Force, as if drowning in a black sea that makes people gasp for breath. There were many mysteries left, the answers to which were never found, but none of that mattered anymore. She wondered if she would just die or go back to her desk. It wasn't so bad to just pick up and disappear like that. If she wasn't going to be rescued, then she was fine as it was. She should die without question. The image of Amy, who had died earlier, came to her. She said that she would be watching over her anyway, guarding her. Qinling is her little Amy. Amy didn't understand what she was talking about, who she was. She looks exactly like the villain she drew, but the little girl wants to sleep so badly that she can't think of anything else. All this time, Baney has been trying to wake Miss Melvin. She didn't understand why she wouldn't wake up. Waking her up didn't seem to help. In all four directions, north, south, west, and east, Chen continued her thorough search, never faltering for a moment. Soon she reached her goal, a sign of which was the paper crane's slight hovering in the air. Watching what was happening, she was inwardly confused, not realizing the reason why all those people were gathered here in the first place. As Amy slowly opened her eyes and stared at Shunyao's figure, a mixture of fear and uncertainty unfolded in her soul. Baney, who was sitting next to her, felt that all was finally lost, and had a premonition of a terrible upcoming event that could end tragically. As the bird frantically chased after the ball that was at the center of all events, everything waited for the one moment that would mark the explosion that would change the course of everything that was happening. Xunyao watched Amy. The little girl kept coming closer and closer and didn't understand what this abomination was. She turned to the monster and explained that her life was no less abominable anyway, so the easiest thing to do was to kill it. No thanks from Xunyao. Amy began to bind the monster with magical threads. Baney was just thrilled that Miss Amy was so cool. The bird tried to struggle. Amy wished Chen good luck on her journey, but suddenly froze in anticipation. The sounds of approaching footsteps caught her attention, and she realized that someone was approaching, bringing with them a sense of freedom, that someone turned out to be Paper Crane, the one who was actively searching for the missing person. Suddenly, as if within an instant, everything came crashing down, the sudden occurrence disturbing the peace. Amy decided that this was not a good moment for such an incident. Xunyao had suddenly intervened, severing the thin threads that held everything together. Such an interference could have served as a catastrophic event, and Baney was already beginning to worry that the situation might get out of control. For an extended period of time, the Paper Crane relentlessly reported the progress of the search, becoming more frequent and insistent in its alerts. Suddenly, Chen Chu-yi suggested that the case was of international significance and influence, emphasizing the seriousness of the situation and its importance at the world level. Xunyao, feeling the mounting pressure and responsibility, moved closer and closer to the young lady, trying to get more involved in the problem and help with the investigation. Appearing suddenly, Xunyao apologized for his lateness, thus showing his willingness to join the team and contribute to solving the situation. Amy opened her eyes and saw Chen fighting the monster. As soon as the young lady came to her senses, Chen said that it was not the best time to explain. She suggested that the first thing they should do was to find a way out of the spell, since the monster was still healing its wounds, it would be very difficult to win. Amy decided to keep calm and began to sort things out to reconstruct the chronology of events. In the last part of the story, the monster attacked her. Now the pink-haired child has flown to their rescue. However, so far it was impossible to escape or kill the monster. The realization came to her that Chun Chu-yi was there with them. Little Amy didn't understand how even the protagonist appeared too soon. Bainey turned to Amy and informed her that they shouldn't spread out and shake in terror just yet. That's right, they need to take control of the situation with their own knowledge of the comic book. Amy addressed Chen by her first and last name and informed her that she needed to aim for the eyes. Then she would be able to stop the beast for a bit. This surprised Chen a great deal. For a moment, Chen aimed at the monster's eyes, and in the next instant, the monster was already defeated, lying on the ground. However, Chen realized that it was too early to relax, because at any moment, the monster could rise up again and continue its attack. Therefore, she decided to leave caution and vigilance at the forefront of her mind to be ready for any possible threats. While Chen focused on the content of the story's narration, Amy felt the danger close to her, approaching her throat like sharp blades. The question of how Amy knew Chen's name came up, which caused some concern and curiosity. It was obvious to Chen that she herself was Amy's creation, like a child born from her artistic inspiration. She noticed that the bird seemed to have begun to rise from the ground, which could indicate that the danger was not yet completely gone and required further vigilance. Amy grabbed Chen, Bainey's hands and asked them to talk later, as the bird was weak in attacking, but hurting it through normal methods would not work, so they should pretend as if it was scared to die there to scurry away. Chen inquired about what exactly she knew. Amy reported that she was not originally fierce, blamed it on her obsession with the dark element Murat. Chen asked that it was then necessary to drive out a wedge with a wedge and use light spells. The trio of them had a huge problem, as none of them should have used this power, causing anxiety and risk to all involved. As the girls moved towards the exit, they found that the road further on was blocked, causing more difficulties and obstacles in their path. In this situation, Chen expressed her opinion, emphasizing the importance of continued punishment for those who commit unkind acts to prevent negative scenarios from recurring and to reinforce control over the situation. While the grandeur and beauty of the moment was impressive in its uniqueness, Amy's tactics based on the excessive expenditure of energy seemed inappropriate and ineffective for dealing with the current problems and challenges. In the next moment, the first candidate for the role of the Knight of Duke Melvin's mansion, Ash, appeared. The magical sense of self-preservation suddenly revitalized Amy, and her legs, weakened by the previous tense situation, regained strength. Ash informed that it was all quite troublesome. He cast spells on the monster. This made Chen incredibly excited. She thought he was an incredible kid who had Kappel's swordsmanship and magic. Ash approached Amy, showing genuine regret for his tardiness, and apologized to her. The gesture spoke of his desire to correct his mistake and regain her trust. As a sign of his remorse and desire to make amends, he handed her an emerald, symbolizing his value and respect for her. This was not only a conciliatory gesture, but also an attempt to return to her favor. Upon seeing the gift, Amy wondered what it was, which made her look at it with curiosity and anticipation. At the same time, Chen was holding his breath as he watched the scene, realizing that this moment would bring with it a certain risk of uncertainty and possible change. In response to Amy's question, Ash explained that there were some things that could only be fixed by herself. This answer spoke to his respect for Amy's independence and strength, as well as his faith in her ability to make decisions and act on her own. He walked over to her and tied a handkerchief around her neck and asked about hearing her voice. Such was one of her abilities. Chen didn't realize what the nonsense was. As soon as the handkerchief was tied, Amy heard a voice from the stone that kept calling for her mom. Chen was generally clueless about what was going on, but tried to pretend as if she understood everything. Ash only thought that even though it was beyond his control to grasp such a thing, the lady would definitely be able to. Ash made a warning maneuver and did not advise her to act recklessly if she wanted to find what she wanted. The voice from the stone kept asking for her mom's help. Amy asked to narrate what had happened, if she didn't mind. The emerald and the bird did not possess their original appearances. They had taken those forms under the influence of sinister foreign forces that they believed were responsible for everything that was happening. A few months ago, in Hua Yue, Wan Dao's mother had asked her daughter to wait a little while at the place, promising to return soon, and begging her not to run away anywhere. The little girl agreed and stayed where she was, fulfilling her mother to the last word. Looking at the departing figure of her mother, she would never have thought that this momentary scene would be her last memory of her, and that her further life would take such a tragic turn. Suddenly, two strangers approached the girl, and one of them, the younger, announced that her family had made searches and now they must take her away with them. The older one explained that it was easier to just take the girl away rather than talk nonsense. Vanya asked who they were. The moment the black-clothed stranger raised his hand, Juan couldn't move a single part of her body. That was how she was kidnapped. Her heart clenched with horror, for no matter how much she screamed and cried, deep in her heart she realized that no one would be able to save her. Mom cried and did not understand where her daughter had disappeared to. A real cry of the soul. To the rescue of the unfortunate doomed souls arrived mysterious stranger. Who is he, enemy or friend? Upon learning of the disappearance, due to disturbing intrusive thoughts, she turned into a bird and rushed to search. The chick catcher, symbolizing a fearsome monster bird with a cat's tail, originated from the deep grief, despair, and sorrow felt by parents who lost their children in accidents. The bird, symbolizing that grief, did not recognize its baby girl in other girls who looked nothing like Wan Du. This caused parents who had lost their children to see them as reincarnations of their mother, giving them extreme tension and a desire to grab them quickly. The manifestations of the black side that the men in black robes were associated with were the result of their desire to make the beast bird stop its restless quest and influence it by administering a strange liquid. It was these events that were the source of the spawning of the black side, which grew out of deep human fears, grief, and a desire to control the unexplainable. The man who did all of this spoke of how she would now become even more powerful and beautiful, so she could tread and further search for her precious child. She was now their weapon. The voice coming from the emerald begged for forgiveness and explained that her mother sought only to be reunited with her with sincere intentions. Amy, expressing her thoughts, clarified that even though there had been a kidnapping, one shouldn't drag those who had nothing to do with them, including other people, into one's own problems. Juan responded by asserting that her mother would never do such a thing, emphasizing her belief in her mother's good intentions and denying the possibility that she could have been complicit in unholy acts. She thought puzzled, noticing that the attacks continued with renewed fury each time, and realizing that revealing the true identity of the Bloody Crow could have consequences. Amy, on the whole, didn't mind dying there, as she would probably be able to return to the real world after death. But what about the others? The bird began to rage. Amy's image turned to her and asked about her need for help. She decided to give her a clue, for she had two choices: cleanse this land or kill it. The young lady was approached by an unknown girl, causing her bewilderment and mixed feelings. The young lady could not understand who she was and why she was addressing her specifically, given her attractive appearance and charismatic demeanor. A voice emanating from Emerald suddenly sounded, informing her to stop such jokes and insults towards her mother. This unexpected turn of events left the young lady in a state of shock and bewilderment, as she suddenly felt a disruption of the usual order of things. As the young lady gazed into the girl's eyes, she noticed a flicker of her daughter's image, which made her wince in surprise. The moment brought additional excitement and confusion, as it brought back memories of family ties and responsibility in her mind. In response to the voice from the Emerald, Amy's image appealed to Ash to spring into action. It was a clear call for him to take the initiative and become involved in resolving the situation at hand. giving the young lady support and assistance. Ash apologized to the young mistress for his tactlessness. He took her hand and reached forward. He asked her to look only forward. Amy's image began to recite a prayer. Enlightened Lord, I pray you heed my call. See the sorrow right before the eyes of the martyr, and with your loving heart, rest the suffering soul. On reflection, Chen felt some uncertainty. Was her action successful? She wondered if it was possible to induce the blinding light formation simply by combining a particle of pure muriate with dark muriate, and how effective a method it could be. At this time, Bainey continued to hold the soul shield, protecting the children who were also praying for salvation and longing to return home. Puzzled, the children couldn't understand why the ghosts wouldn't leave them, preferring to stay with them instead of being released. However, Chen noticed that the number of the children's spirits was becoming too great, and she realized that it was necessary to prevent them from making their way out. Chen came to Bainey's aid to hold back the barrier. Bainey asked her to hurry up and finish what she had started, for she could no longer hold out. There was no need for haste. Amy's image sent a cleansing message. Mom and daughter were finally reunited. Ash informed them that they now needed to guide them back to the seal. Everything came back. The children's souls were reunited with their bodies. Amy, with a heavy heart and excitement in her eyes, was finally able to formulate the question that had been simmering in her soul for a long time, and turned to Ash, expressing her hopes for a different outcome. "Is this the end now?" To which the latter nodded in an agreeing gesture. In an unexpected moment, the young mistress felt a sharp, prickling sensation piercing her, as if an icy coldness was penetrating every cell of her body. Seconds seemed to slow down, and the sudden cough that soared from her throat turned into a surprisingly heavy coughing attack, accompanied by an instant release of blood. This frightening moment created an atmosphere of anxiety and worry around her. Bainey asked the guard Ash to get Mistress out of there as soon as possible, for her body couldn't stand being there a little longer. Amy asked that they not return together. Bainey replied that she couldn't go. Since she was just like everyone else, she belonged there. She said that she was happy to spend leisure time with them and she was sorry they didn't become friends. So they said goodbye. Meanwhile, in the nobleman's prison, Mr. Bayld kept thinking that no one would have thought how the Viscount, devastated by the loss of his daughter, would suddenly go mad, transgress the law, and turn traitor to his homeland. What a skillful plan. He kept spinning the ball and talking about how, since Bainey had fallen victim to the chick catcher, there would be no suspicion of him now. Events were moving according to the script, and the trap was already set and easy to use. In that balloon was the image of his daughter Bainey. Under the guise of fear over the kidnapping of his favorite child, he attacked a girl of noble lineage, pinning a stone impregnated with the dark energy of Murat to attract the bird's attention. Then followed an even easier step. The conversation between the Duke and the ruler must necessarily affect that person, and for the duration of the conversation, the guards in the corridor leading to them will be called off. Just because of the foolish belief of aristocrats in their own security when being in their chambers, and then the weak princess is carried away by a strange monster. If suddenly she really turns out to be the curiosity they are looking for, there will be no limit to the happiness. But if not, he is left to grieve for his poor Bainey. Later they will meet in hell. As long as things go as planned, though, there's no cause for concern. Amy's image reported that even wrapped up tightly, it still eventually continues to suck the life force out of her. Ash thanked him for his assistance in any way. She simply asked him to take care of her sweet Amy. Very noisy. Someone was calling for Qinling's mentor. She didn't understand why there were several voices at the same time. She asked not to say that name because it wasn't hers. Someone called for Amy Melvin, and that caused the little girl to wake up abruptly. She noticed Kano and a bird beside her, asking her to wake up. She saw the young mistress in front of her. She screamed to call Dean, for the lady was awake. The little girl's ears popped. As it turned out, she had been unconscious for a week since the accident. Chen Qiuyi returned to her home country, and Ash decided to take a little vacation. Dean said that he had cleared the traces of the dark Murat element found in her body, so she should take a good rest, and then asked if anything else was bothering her or not. It was unusual for Amy to be trying to take care of her, almost to the point of incredible exhaustion. It turned out that warm and tender emotions that were intended originally not for her were very hard for her to accept. She wondered how Bainey was doing, completely lacking the courage to ask, even after getting there continuing to run away from reality like a worthless, feeble-minded fool. Alan, gripped by sudden excitement, involuntarily had his sister's name ripped out of him, shrill in the air. It was the moment when the emotions simmering in his soul found vent in a sudden exclamation. He asked her if she wouldn't mind going for a walk a little later when she was better, because her older cousin had recently returned, so they could meet up with him, and the three of them could chat. He asked her how she felt about his suggestions. The paper crane, which served as a communication, relayed a message from the mentor on how the errand was going, to which Chen replied that everything had already been accomplished. The target's soul was returning back to Hua Yue. She went on to say that in truth, this time, they almost got involved in a huge conspiracy and tangled intrigue, so she suggested to just send an ambassador. Simply put, they were set up. If the body of the behemoth that stalked Capel's citizens didn't show signs of third-party intervention, Chen asked what he thought would have happened. Now, in addition to the civilians, the following were involved: high-ranking aristocrats, nobles, and the imperial family itself. Naturally, the situation would easily escalate into a diplomatic conflict. Next, the matter would come under the control of the inspector's office. While passing by, she was caught by the prince. He apologized for it, to which she replied that it was fine. Chen looked at him and noticed his blonde hair, violet eyes, and Capel's crest in the form of a brooch. The prince, showing his care and attention, turned to her with a question full of concern, asking if she had hurt herself. Chen only realized that the Prince of Capel himself had met with her, just recently finished with a difficult task, and now there was a kind of fear and hesitation. Amy thought about that remembered cousin of sorts, the second Prince of Capel, and the main character of the comic book. The first person in history to successfully combine mechanical technology and various resources, having created many household items and military weapons, recognized as a scientific genius due to his charisma and attractive appearance, was called the inimitable talent of the second generation of the imperial family. The national treasure of the first generation is Finir Melvin, highly revered among the people and is the most suitable successor to the throne. At first, there was an interest inside to get to know the protagonist of the story and hear about his childhood. At this moment, however, it disappeared. Alan, full of earnest desire and perseverance, was relentless in his solicitations and pleading gaze, endeavoring to convey to her heart the importance of his wishes. A real charmer, suggestively presenting his proposals, he created an aura of irresistible charm around him. Amy, meeting his gaze and smile, felt his magnetism envelop her. She couldn't help but succumb to this attractive energy that surrounded him like an invisible magnet. Amy replied that they should just follow their arrangement. A tinge of confusion flickered on her face, like a dance of unresolved questions that swirled in her mind. Meanwhile, across from her, Alan, on the contrary, radiated excitement and joy. His smile sparkled brightly, emphasizing the positive emotions that transfixed him. The young gentleman asked Dean and Kano to take the little miss to rinse herself, and he would keep her company on the shopping trip. Little Miss inquired about the fact that hadn't they agreed to go shopping in a couple days? Alan strolled through the corridors, and the bird on his shoulder asked him if he was out of his mind, for the young mistress had barely woken up. Whereas before, her appearance was like a lifeless doll, devoid of any emotion or expression. Now you can see that her appearance expresses something much deeper and more touching, like a candle with a faint, dim flame that is about to be extinguished by a breeze. Any minute now its wax will melt away completely, leaving behind only a decayed wick. Only now, seeing her sister gradually losing her mind, realizing how dangerous it was to let go of this situation. Bird only replied that it was hard to be a caring brother, can he otherwise completely unconcerned about his own person? Alan and Amy unexpectedly bumped into two acquaintances during their walk. Now there are four of them spending leisure time together. What will happen at the sit-down when each of the characters has different thoughts on their minds? Meanwhile, in Chen, Lucian, being a caring and careful observer, asked the young man if he had lost something unforeseen. The paper crane asked if she would continue to remain silent. Chen asked to stop talking as they were bumping into a big shot. Mentor asked what was bigger than even them. Chen said that it was the famous second son and prince of Capel, no idea how much he had overheard from their conversation. Crane said that it seemed to be broken. Chen then demanded the money she had spent back, because she didn't want to buy a new communicator. Then she was told that the bosses unexpectedly at the last minute decided to give her a couple of days of vacation, so she can have fun there. Chen asked what about the monster bird, to which she was told that they would send someone to get her and disconnected. Chen tried to dial them again, but the dialed number is temporarily unavailable. She should try calling back later. The prince even got curious. She poked him. The prince asked about that crane being a communication technology with Huayue. He came up so unexpectedly that it startled her. Amy asked her brother about who would be walking around the evening market at this hour. Alan asked her to take it as an attempt to make amends since they hadn't gone out last time. He apologized for his willfulness. At an unexpected moment, Lucian appeared, accompanied by Chen, and initiated greetings, noting that it had been a long time since they had met. Alan, responding to his older brother's greeting, joined the meeting, saluting him in return. Lucian Capel contributed additional details by telling that he met the little girl from Huayue, emphasizing his own role in the story as the main character. His story added mystery and interest to what was going on around him, and also raised questions about what other storylines might await those involved in the events. In response to Chen Qiuyi's greeting, the protagonist expressed interest in her well-being, showing concern and consideration for the other participants in the conversation. Amy Melvin, the main villain, replied that she was fine and thanked her for her concern. She took back her hand. Alan Melvin, the villainess's twin brother, didn't understand why she didn't want to hold hands anymore. Yes, a whole exclusive squad of child protagonists, a diagram of the characters' relationships. But the plot of the story didn't start to unfold normally that they met. I don't care. You can't undo what you've done. Too many things have already happened that aren't in the original, and she keeps remembering the origins. After a while, Lucian said he'd gotten the castle card. He'd gotten lucky. A special card. Alan said he got the spike card, and Amy got the noon card. There was a mysterious atmosphere in the air surrounding the young lady, and she could hardly understand the reason why they decided to spend time playing cards in a cozy cafe. This unusual choice of occupation made her somewhat perplexed and curious as to what such actions might hint at this moment. As Chen watched the prince intently, she wondered if this gambling activity was part of Lucian's scheme. There was something mysterious in her speculation, and she felt that there might be ulterior motives behind this choice of entertainment, especially while she was focused on the game itself. Looking at the situation of playing cards in the cafe was perceived by the girls as a bad time for excitement and fun. They felt that the atmosphere was not conducive to gambling, and perhaps their mood did not match the time they were spending. At the same time, Alan, convinced that time spent in the company of peers was sure to bring joy and fulfillment to the young lady, saw the activity as an opportunity to lift her spirits and evoke positive emotions. His thoughts were directed to the welfare and happiness of his younger sister, and he believed that such leisure time would be pleasant and cheerful for her. Lucian wished to divorce himself because he had been engaged in research and development for ages that he could hardly rest. At least now he could have fun with the guys. For the boys, the scene was more than just a moment. It was a kaleidoscope of rapturous emotions and impressions. Sparks of excitement flickered in their eyes, and their faces bloomed with broad smiles expressing their complete enjoyment of the scene. The prince said that he had heard about Huayue's communicating cranes for a long time, but he had just seen it in person. He was truly amazed at the sheer distance at which speech was transmitted. Chen replied that they only have a couple of tricks of their own, and in addition, they also have a similar mechanism, only crystal. Luqian explained that even with the ability to transmit an image, that crystal was expensive to create, consumed energy quickly, and was limited by distance. He was the inventor of the communication crystal. Chen, who was the inventor of origami communication, informed that she was an ordinary citizen and didn't know about scientific stuff. She asked, why don't they ask knowledgeable people about it? All the while, Alan was trying to explain the rules to his sister. Amy watched the two of them and didn't understand how they even had time to debate with the cards. The kids here were truly scary, proving to each other who was boss. The prince said that she was a real humble girl, a mid-level executive of the inspection bureau. Or should I call her the junior head of the Huiyu trade union? Now this already represented a really exciting situation. In the spacious room, one of the characters complimented the other by calling him humble. He added that his interlocutor was an intermediate executive officer in the Bureau of Pork Inspector. The young man standing next to him reflected on his notoriety, pondering that his identity had been revealed after the Sword-Seeker incident. His face expressed concern over this matter. A young master from the Feathered Herb Guild noted that they had now attracted a lot of attention. He held a fan in front of his face, trying to hide his embarrassment. At the people around him, pondering that if someone didn't know better, they might think that he had a secret sympathy for them. He felt that this could cause more problems. After the incidents caused by the monsters of their country, the character thought about the fact that he had received orders to recall them without explanation. He realized that if it was linked to the relationship between the two countries, it could lead to serious consequences. The gathered crowd of people were discussing the situation. The character realized that the Inspection Bureau could not ignore the matter and decided to take action, which annoyed him. During the critical moment, one of the characters, hiding his concern, decided that they could call themselves friends, but it seemed too formal. With a smile, he suggested a closer acquaintance, holding a fan and looking at his interlocutor. They both looked embarrassed and a little confused. Character noticed that it had been a while since he had seen Amy and inquired about her well-being. Amy had just woken up and was trying to figure out what was going on around her. She looked surprised and a little disoriented. One of the characters admitted that he wasn't very tactful, and the incident of the day didn't warrant investigation at this time. Another character, reflecting thoughtfully, noted that the situation looked suspicious when scrutinized. Thinking back to the original work, the character realized that the mutation of the Seeker's sword was the enemy country's plan for destruction. He noted that arriving at this time was suspicious. He decided that if the enemy had a goal they wanted to eliminate, it might explain their actions. The character began to ponder who exactly could be their target. One character, addressing his cousin, noted that she must have spent a long time on the road and inquired about her schedule. Amy asked if there was a girl who used to be a nun wrapped in bandages in the royal family. Her question piqued the interest of her interlocutor. The young man remembered that Verbania was a country that worshipped an artificial deity and wondered if he would meet that girl at an upcoming ball. The character decided that he must find out their motives and stop the aimless life that would be disrupted. He, acting as a Viscount, reflected that he had received an invitation to the royal ball and thought of the residence of Viscount Beld. The character stood back looking at his reflection and pondered whether Lady Amy would attend the ball. The character reflected on the upcoming event, stating that the next one would be a ball to be held at the royal palace in 2 days. He noted that diplomats from Verbania would be attending the event. He clarified if they were indeed interested, his gaze full of anticipation and curiosity. Evening had come, and the breeze in the dark night was both soothing and melancholy. He, being alone in such an atmosphere, found it ideal for thinking about life and philosophy. Suddenly he realized that he was in a manga world where he was experiencing other people's lives. He felt confused, wondering what he should do and how he should act in this situation. Realizing that purposeful exploration and mistakes without purpose seemed insane, he thought about how he hated the hectic lifestyle and felt powerless and out of control. his gaze focused on the image in the mirror, imagining the struggle and confusion that filled his mind. He reflected on how difficult it was to make sense of every dramatic moment. The character admitted that he used to be just a gloomy manhwa artist, but now his quiet daily life had changed, filled with unexpected events. At this point, he realized that he hated the hectic lifestyle, which he compared to a life of farce. He felt powerless and out of control. He wondered what he should do and how he should act in this situation. There was despair and hope for help in his eyes. Suddenly, a dazzling girl appeared in front of him. She started asking questions, marveling at his reaction and calling him cute, though stupid. The character tried to comprehend her words, feeling awkward and somewhat embarrassed. The girl continued, insisting that if he had any doubts, he should just ask her. She assured him that she would tell the truth and hold nothing back. Her words caused him a storm of emotion, and he wondered what was going on and why he felt so helpless. She explained that even if the thoughts were painful, it was better to express them or he would lose even more. The character continued to ponder that, even deep down, if the thoughts are good, they can hurt if you think too much. As she spoke, he felt more and more confused and bewildered. He wondered what exactly she wanted to tell him. She explained that his past now belonged to the past, and this was not the real end. He must seek the truth. He asked himself if what he had created really belonged to the past now, and if he could find a better ending. She assured him that he must keep searching and not stop there. She said that she was his only source of hope and truth in this complicated world. The character tried to understand what exactly she was trying to tell him, and wondered if he could really find the truth. The girl explained that if he was thinking about her, she was real. She called herself Amy Morwen. He began to doubt her words, thinking it was just a manhwa, and how could it be Amy's reincarnation? The girl continued, saying that if he was talking about the character Amy in the manhwa, then it was her, but that was the wrong answer. She explained that the real Amy Morwen was himself, or more specifically, Zhang Qingling. She insisted that Zhang Qingling was Amy's reincarnation, and he should accept that. The character was shocked, trying to understand exactly what she meant, and wondered if he was really Amy's reincarnation. The girl said that while he could consider himself Amy, it was important to realize that Zhang Qingling's life also mattered and couldn't just be left behind. He felt confused, trying to understand what she wanted to say and what to do next. She was convincing him that he should search for the truth and not stop until he found it. He pondered her words, realizing that what he had created now belonged to the past, and it wasn't the real end. She assured him that he should seek the true end and not stop there. She urged him to seek her and not give up, despite all the difficulties. Meanwhile, another character appeared from the Duchy of Mevon, representing Duke Finel Morwen and his daughter. They officially announced that Amy Morwen was in attendance, adding even more mystery to the situation. The royal ball, with its splendid opulence, made the guests feel uneasy. As soon as they entered, there were many stares, and the character wondered if it was because he was strangely dressed. He noticed that Elian had business to attend to, so he asked him and the Duke to enter first. Benny Beld, interim Viscount Beld, introduced himself. He greeted the guests, recognizing that it had been a long time since their last meeting. The young man shocks those around him with his appearance, which causes one of them to exclaim that, "The corpse is talking!" He continues to insist that he is alive and is perplexed as to why he is perceived as strange. One of the characters is surprised and questions how this young man became a viscount. He exclaims that he expected joy and tears when they met, not such a cold reception. Another character calmly suggests that he calm down and watch his words. He reminds him that they have been through many trials together and calls for more understanding. Meanwhile, the young man expresses his suspicion that the performance of important tasks has been entrusted to someone who seems frivolous. He ponders the motives behind this decision. A scene appears in his imagination, where another character demonstrates his determination and perseverance in matters of the capital's security. This image evokes mixed feelings for him. At a banquet, A young man greets his acquaintances. He is informed that they have not heard from him in a long time, and he looks as gorgeous as ever. One of the guests reports that he heard a noise from far away, and it was very lively. The character agrees that there is always a lot going on here. At this time, the arrival of new guests catches the attention of many. Someone in the crowd comments that the Duca brought Lady Amy with him to the ball. The characters discuss how Capel now does not stick to old traditions, and the new style of ruling is more modern. This gives them positive emotions. One of the guests comments that Duca and his companion look great together, and it is a sight that really draws the eye. Another character introduces her partner from Crescent Peak, adding even more intrigue and interest to the overall mood of the meeting. The girl asks the participants to take care of her as she is a newcomer. She expresses her gratitude for the hospitality. A character approaches the Duke and says that his uncle would like to speak to him privately. He relays the request for a meeting. Duca views these words with suspicion, believing it may be a trap. He ponders the possible consequences of such a meeting. At this time, the other characters discuss the situation, wondering why Duca looks so intimidating despite his smile. The girl exclaims that it looks like a fox's smile, and adds that this Duca seems scary to her. The characters discuss that the Emperor and the Duca want to talk privately, and in the meantime, the girl decides to do other things. She ponders the fate of one of the characters who was captured and nearly starved to death. Her thoughts are full of memories of her experiences. She recalls how she was rescued by one of the women from Crescent Peak, which helped her survive and cope. In the end, she concludes that the most important thing is that her friend is alive. Her thoughts are centered on his safety and well-being. In the final scene, one of the characters apologizes for the interruption and introduces himself as Werlin's messenger. His appearance raises new questions and discussions for all involved. A young couple is enjoying a moment at the banquet hall, and he notices that the atmosphere at the event is great, and it would be a shame not to participate. He puts his arm around her and she rejoices in their closeness. He draws her attention to the hour, 3 o'clock, and points out a man who stands out among the other guests. She begins to scrutinize the indicated point. A secret observer in a dark robe notices that one of the guests has approached another important character, and another is about to leave the main hall. They begin to suspect that this is a target from the kingdom of Verbania. He decides to follow the one leaving to find out his intentions. At the same time, he plans to check the condition of another girl in the same building. The character asks the guests to enjoy their time, showing his hospitality and attention to detail. He also says he will pay attention to the girl's condition. He welcomes the guests from Verbania, expressing his reverence for them and wishing them long prosperity for the empire of Capir. His welcoming words are filled with respect and diplomacy. He tells them that before Capir gained independence, the country was ruled by the royal family from Verbania. This creates a historical link between the two nations. Verbania, which on the surface seemed peaceful, was actually planning the overthrow of Capir. They sought to regain their former influence and position using covert methods to do so. The character ponders his motives for why his interlocutors chose to speak to him at this event. He suspects they have a hidden agenda. One of the guests from Verbania openly states that he has come to take the saint away. He claims that the girl known as Lady Amy is a rare user of the dark attribute Murat. The girl is outraged, believing it to be complete nonsense and lies. She does not believe that her friend can be connected to such forces. Meanwhile, the character in the black robe smiles, enjoying the resulting turmoil. He realizes that the announcement was made to cause resonance and confusion among those present. They publicly declare a girl from an enemy kingdom as their saint, much to the shock and bewilderment of everyone in the room. She realizes that she is the center of attention, and this causes her to feel a sense of panic. She feels intense pressure, realizing that her every word and action could have serious consequences. Her thoughts are centered on the need to be careful. She realizes that if she makes a mistake, her family will be under attack by public opinion. The responsibility for doing the right thing falls on her shoulders. One of the older guests expresses his outrage, finding the behavior of the guests from Verbania disrespectful. He demands an explanation for their impertinent behavior. Another character rebukes the guests for their arrogance, saying that they should not consider Kapir their playground. Her words are full of confidence and determination. He observes that the guest's interference does not improve the situation, but only complicates it. He reproaches him for being overprotective and insistent. He believes that the girl with the dark attribute Murat can benefit Verbania, despite her dislike of the attribute. His thoughts focus on the possibility of utilizing her power. He ponders possible scenarios in which the situation could benefit both parties. He sees it as a chance for mutually beneficial cooperation. In the end, he concludes that he needs to proceed with caution and deliberation so as not to harm himself or his loved ones. His determination and confidence become key in this difficult situation. The character pondered whether anyone thought everyone was as narrow-minded as the people of Verbin. He thought that regardless of Murat, everyone is different, and they should not be judged equally. Another character pointed out that the girl belonged to Kapiru, so she was one of them. He felt relieved that he had found an ally. The man with long black hair, hiding his face with his hand, thought with grim joy that it warmed his heart. Amy suddenly found herself in a dark space and shuddered as she saw her captor slam the doors around them with a crash. He welcomed her into his dark domain, noting that she would not escape so easily. Amy tried to remain calm, realizing that her abilities might be blocked in this place. She began to doubt her powers and wondered how she had gotten here. The kidnapper, mocking her attempts to keep her composure, said she was very nice, pretending to be calm to buy time. He decided to share information with her in appreciation for her bravery, asking if she remembered the chaplain's bird. Amy, straining to look at him, was perplexed as to where he got the information that she was using Murat's abilities. She thought it was ridiculous and demanded an explanation. The kidnapper pulled out a crystal, explaining that it was recording everything that was happening. He confirmed that the information about her abilities was correct. In the dark space, time stopped, and the kidnapper told Amy that no one could save her except light user Murat. Amy realized that his targets were her and the girl who had been using Murat all along. She pondered on how he planned to proceed next. The kidnapper noted with a smile on his face that Amy was the most important figure to them and that she was the one causing trouble. The girl in the yellow dress decided to act and ordered the guards to take control of the Verbin man. At this moment, when things became uncontrollable, Amy felt that her next move was completely taken over by unknown circumstances. Meanwhile, the black-haired kidnapper was enjoying his power, admitting that he hadn't expected such a surprise. Smiling happily, he admired Amy, calling her beautiful and expressive. He spoke her name again, recognizing her importance. Enraged and afraid, Amy ordered him to be silent, but her captor mocked her emotions, saying she must feel anger, sadness, and hatred to increase her power. A group of people in the audience wondered if Amy was being controlled as she stopped listening to them. They began to panic as they saw the situation spiraling out of control. A young man tried to stop Amy, begging her not to take another step forward. He looked scared and determined at the same time. The guards, seeing what was happening, rushed to help, yelling for someone to catch the Duke. They realized that if this continued, Amy might lose control. Another character came up to Amy and covered her eyes with his hands, trying to calm her down and tell her not to look and not to be afraid. He was telling her not to cry, trying to protect her from the horror of what was happening. When Amy regained consciousness, she was in an unfamiliar place, alone and scared. She was surrounded by buildings and snow, and she didn't remember anything from her past. She didn't know where she came from, where her family was, or why she was here. Feeling helpless, Amy could only wander among the crowds of unfamiliar faces like a ghost. After a while, cold and hunger began to take over her body. She tried to warm herself, but all to no avail. She thought her breathing might soon be silenced by the snow. Suddenly, a ray of light came into her eyes. A man appeared in front of her, offering her to come with him. Instead of snow, she found herself in the warmth and comfort of a young couple's embrace. Amy instantly jumped at this rare opportunity and felt the warmth of their care. She found support and protection in them, even though she didn't know them. Even though they called her Zhang Qinglin, She felt that it wasn't her real name. But looking at their faces that she didn't recognize, she would gladly respond to their care. Of course, Amy longed for their love and care because she missed it so much. Despite all her misfortunes, she felt it was what she needed. But her misfortunes began with a simple glass of mango juice. Amy remembered how she started coughing and choking after drinking the juice. She couldn't believe that her allergies could cause such serious problems. Her heart was beating fast as she realized it could be dangerous. Her friend apologized, but Amy felt that her dream could end if she woke up from her dream, so Amy lied, saying she wasn't allergic. Amy hugged her friend, explaining that she just had a fever today. They hugged tightly, like a drowning man grabbing onto an ice floe. Amy knew that her deception could have unfortunate consequences, but she couldn't let go of that warmth. She realized that they were all seeking a false salvation. Amy knew she couldn't get what she needed unless she asked for it. But even by asking, she still couldn't get it. She still longed for the warmth she had once experienced. When asked who she was, she replied that she was Zhang Qingling, knowing that she was only a substitute. Amy knew that she was just a replacement, and that was fine with her. She was willing to be the perfect Zhang Qinlin despite the pain and betrayal. Her dream was held on thin threads that she couldn't let go. Even if she became a falling leaf being carried away by the wind, she still longed for the day when she felt loved. Amy pondered her thoughts, realizing that her desire for warmth and love was stronger than her fear of the truth. She knew that her dream might be false, but it was better than emptiness and coldness. Her willingness to be Zhang Qingling was her only way to keep this warmth and love she so desperately sought. She was called a kind person, but was told that she didn't have to continue that. She was reminded that she was not the person she was trying to replace. She knew she wasn't the real one, but she felt like a replacement for the child who had voluntarily left this world. She realized that her role was to maintain this illusion, and that was fine with her. She realized that her foster parents began to avoid her, perhaps out of guilt. She began to be left alone for long periods of time, leaving her with only a little money. She wondered if this freedom was real freedom or just an illusion of it. It was not the freedom of solitude that surrounded her, but a cage called love. She realized that what she wanted was not freedom, but real affection. She asked herself this question over and over again while standing on top of a high-rise building. She wasn't interested in where to look for answers, but she felt she had to find the meaning of her existence. She thought that perhaps she could experience what true freedom was if she flew with the birds. She decided that she had to find her place where she could be truly free. Suddenly she was warned, saying it was dangerous here. She was rescued, and it was like a plot twist in a drama that was both an ending and a beginning. She was offered help in making webtoons, and it gave her a new meaning to life. She was reminded that she didn't have to do everything she was told, but to strive for what she really wanted. She started painting with a webtoon artist who rescued her, and this activity became her salvation. She realized that her life no longer had to be about other people. She kept wondering why the world didn't crumble to the ground. Every time she thought it was over, fate gave her hope. That hope was shaky, but she had an obligation to repay the help she had been given. She hoped that everyone around her could find their happiness, even if she herself couldn't. Her memories of her parents, the snowy night, and the teacher's intervention on the roof were like a web that held her. These warm memories made her life meaningful, and she felt she could live for others. She realized that she was not a kind person, but she could not afford to die before those who helped her. She decided that she couldn't save everyone who was drowning, but she would try to help those who were dear to her. Even if those people aren't the main characters, she won't leave them in trouble. She questioned who could stop her, and answered herself that no one could. She decided to take action, realizing it was a crime. Her teacher realized that she had found her purpose, but it was something illegal. She realized that no one could stop her, and she was determined to get rid of the one who had hurt her. She feels like she doesn't have to keep pretending anymore because she realizes she isn't who she seemed to be all along. He tells her that she is kind, but she knows that she is not. She decides that she will continue to play her role for as long as she can. She realizes that she is only a replacement for the child who has left this world. She is told that she can do whatever she wants, but she must not imitate others. She ponders freedom, and it seems to her that freedom without commitment is not true freedom. Her foster parents begin to avoid her, spending time away and leaving her little money. She feels lonely, even though outwardly she seems to have freedom. She wonders what freedom means and searches for the meaning of her existence. She often stands on high places, watching the sunset, and ponders whether it is worth it to look for other reasons to live. She has no interest in finding meaning, but she keeps thinking about it. She is on the verge of jumping, but suddenly hears a voice warning her that it is dangerous. She laughs, feeling that maybe she can realize what true freedom is. Someone saves her, and she realizes that people shouldn't die so easily. She meets the webtoon artist who saved her, and he helps her realize that she needs to live for herself. He teaches her how to draw and tells her that you can't commit crimes by following other people's instructions. She uses her drawing abilities to take her mind off her problems and starts a new life. But she still feels that the world doesn't give her a chance, and every time she thinks it's over, fate gives her hope. She realizes that she has to live for herself and be grateful to those who have helped her. She wishes that everyone but her could have a happy ending. But she knows that not everyone can be saved. The heroine decides that she is not a kind person, but she will not stand by if someone needs help. She wants to save those who are important to her, even if it means committing a crime. She recalls warm moments with her parents, support from friends, and help from a webtoon artist. These memories make her life meaningful, and she decides to live for them. She realizes that she is not the protagonist, but she is willing to do anything to help others. She realizes that her actions are important, even if she is just a passing character in the lives of others. The protagonist decides that she must stop a criminal who is threatening her friends. She knows that no one can stop her because she is willing to do whatever it takes for her loved ones. The protagonist falls, but she is caught and rescued. He tells her that she can relax and enjoy the banquet. She thanks him and feels safe. She wonders what to say for a spectacular introduction and is told that her hero has arrived. She is relieved when she realizes that she has those around her who are willing to help her in any situation. Amy stood looking around, feeling exhausted. She reflected on how her overprotective brother was always afraid to let her go. She realized his concern was genuine, but sometimes it felt like a lack of trust. Amy noticed that he put a lot of protective spells on her and wondered if he didn't trust her powers, which made her feel even more insecure. Every time she faced difficulties, she remembered his constant warnings and concern. Her brother anxiously asked if she was feeling ill. He noticed that she had acted recklessly this time and now looked tired and exhausted. His voice was full of worry as he reminded her of past occasions when she had barely managed her strength. Now her condition was even worse, and it was causing him great concern. He couldn't help but notice how she had changed over the past few days, and it worried him even more. He had promised Amy that he would remove all obstacles in her way. His determination was unwavering despite all the difficulties that stood before them. He was willing to go to any lengths to keep her safe and help her achieve her goals. Amy could see his eyes glowing with determination, and it gave her some peace of mind, even though she knew the journey would be difficult. Amy thanked him, but was puzzled as to why he was helping her. She asked the question, looking at him questioningly, trying to understand his true motives. Her voice trembled as she asked why he was willing to risk it for her. She wanted to know what drove him, what made him stand by her side despite all the dangers. Her brother explained that they were friends and that he would never leave her in trouble. Amy was touched by his words, but still didn't fully understand his motives. She knew that friendship was important, but she couldn't understand why he was willing to make such sacrifices. His words were sincere, and it made her wonder how deep their bond went. Her brother added with a smile that he was just a very righteous man. Amy felt mixed emotions, gratitude on one hand and bewilderment on the other. Her thoughts were confused as she tried to realize what being righteous really meant. She knew his kindness was genuine, but she still couldn't fully understand his motives. At that moment, another character appeared, pointing at Amy and referring to her as Murat's dark user. His gaze was shrewd and suspicious. He clearly didn't trust her. It was an unexpected accusation, and Amy felt a cold fear gripping her heart. Her brother instantly tensed, preparing his defense. The crowd around them began to demand that Amy be handed over to them. They looked hostile and ready for conflict. Their faces were contorted with anger and hatred, and Amy realized that the situation was becoming increasingly dangerous. Her brother stood by her side, ready to protect her at all costs, and that gave her some reassurance. Amy stood next to her brother, feeling protected. He knew they were not from the kingdom of Verban, and wondered what they wanted from Amy, having traveled all this way. He could see his sister trying to keep a cool head despite the tense situation. He realized he had to be strong for her sake. He reflected that it wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to fight. His resolve grew stronger by the minute. He knew they had a huge responsibility, and he couldn't afford to back down. He needed to protect his sister and her honor, despite any difficulties they might encounter along the way. His enemies recognized that they had committed a crime and mockingly asked what he was going to do next. They felt confident that they were right, and that only strengthened his resolve. He knew he couldn't let them win, and he was preparing for the next step in this fight. Every mocking comment they made only strengthened his desire to protect his sister. Her brother, knowing he had to protect Amy at all costs, decided it was his duty to divine their punishment. He felt responsible for her safety. His heart was filled with determination and righteous anger, and he knew he would not stop until he had done his duty. He saw his enemies looking at him and realized he had to show them his strength. Amy noted with a smile that his enemies talked a lot of nonsense, and she let her brother deal with them. She knew he could handle it, and that gave her confidence. Her heart was full of determination, and she believed that together they could overcome all difficulties. She watched her brother prepare for battle, and it filled her with pride. He explained that Murat's power came from Verban, and they were merely giving back what was theirs. He considered it a form of justice, and his words were full of conviction. He knew their actions were righteous, and it gave him the strength to keep fighting. Amy listened to him, realizing that he believed in what he was doing, and it filled her with confidence. Amy, trying to remain calm, asked her brother not to be impulsive. She remembered the words of her teacher telling her to do what she wanted. Her voice was soft but confident as she asked him to be careful. She knew their journey would be difficult, but she believed they could overcome all obstacles. She decided that if she rebelled a little, that was okay too. Her brother was ready to support her in any way, realizing that together they could overcome all difficulties. Her heart was full of determination, and she knew she wasn't alone. Their bond was strong, and together they could face any challenge. In the midst of the night forest, a group of adversaries encounters two children. One of them asks if the leader of the group is sure of his decision to go against them, for they are not the real target. Regardless of the outcome of the battle, they must remember that they will be enemies of Morwen's family. The group leader reasons that the synthetic power they possess is annoying, but it is easily defeated by Murat's power of light. He suggests that their goal must involve these powers, and reasons that Verban will have to deal with a user of Murat's light in order to destroy Kapir. Right now, Kapir only has one user of Murat's light per generation. Capellan's bird was rescued by Murat's light user, and the leader of the group realizes that their task is difficult. The leader recalls a recent test and suggests that his role is to be a surprise because his power is linked to an artificial god. He asks if the others agree with his plan. The defenders advise the group to think carefully about their situation because they are not easy targets. Meanwhile, one of the defenders is looking for a way out of the situation and gives a sign to another defender to act. The girl they are protecting wonders if the opponents really see a child in front of them. The defenders reassure her that they should not be afraid and that victory is possible if they act decisively. One of the defenders prepares to attack, assuring her friend that she is ready for battle. She begins to accumulate power and directs it against her opponents, creating a strong magical field. The opponents realize that she is about to attack and order a protective barrier to be created. However, the defense proves insufficient, and they are trapped. The area is emptied of explosions, and the opponents realize that they have been tricked. The girl laughs, realizing that their plan worked. They flee the battle zone, leaving the opponents confused. One of the defenders explains that their power has grown due to anger, but they don't know how to use the dark Murat. The girl admits that it was just a ruse. The defenders plan their next move, assuring each other that they would not be defeated if they actually engaged in battle. The girl continues to assure her friend that everything will be fine. They jump over the walls, using a shortcut to avoid the chase. Finally, they reach safety and declare the mission accomplished. They are greeted with thanks and cheers. The girl is relieved that everything ended safely. They return to Morwen Manor, where another member of their team is waiting for them. He thanks them for a job well done and their return. The last character who meets them expresses his opinion, calling one of them a useless piece of trash. The girl feels mixed feelings after hearing this. They stand around and wonder if anyone thinks they are useless. This causes them to be perplexed and question. At this point, Verbinia's assassins come into action. They appear unexpectedly and attack quickly and suddenly, causing the characters to tense up and prepare to defend themselves. The man watching this shows his strength and easily neutralizes the assassins. He does this with such ease that it emphasizes the difference in level between himself and his opponents. He disparagingly remarks that if these are Verbinia's best assassins, he shouldn't even bother. His confidence in his abilities leaves no doubt. After that, the man turns his attention to those watching. He tells them to watch his actions closely to realize the difference in level. One of the girls, feeling relieved after the fight, sighs deeply. She realizes that all the fatigue and pain accumulated during the day is coming back to her. Unable to bear the strain, the girl begins to lose consciousness. She falls, but another character manages to pick her up, preventing injury. This character is relieved that he managed to catch the girl in time and she remains unharmed. This brings him a sense of satisfaction. He orders another character to take care of the girl urgently so that she gets the medical attention she needs. The importance of this task is emphasized by his tone. The man, looking at his hand, reflects on the actions of the other girl. He admires how deftly she handles the knife, which emphasizes her high level of skill. His admiration turns to the thought that her actions have always been smooth and clean. He notes that her skills have consistently remained at a high level. The other girl watching marvels at her dexterity and skills. She admits that she will never match such virtuosity. The man who has assumed the role of leader assigns the girl with the knife to clear the area of the attackers. This important assignment shows his trust in her abilities. He notices that the girl he holds in his arms cannot resist the effects of the dark Murat. This makes him feel responsible and concerned. He tells her that she cannot leave him as long as she needs to live and breathe. His words sound both like a warning and a promise of protection. At this time, the queen, watching from her throne, makes a remark about how the evening has been ruined by the assassins from Verbania. This causes her disappointment. A man dressed in a black cloak makes a comment about how children like to speak freely, but asks not to be offended by it. He tries to mitigate a possible misunderstanding. He asks another character if the other character is trying to do something unpleasant under the pretext of a gift. His suspicion is met with wariness. He is answered that they must take the blame for the insult. This admission makes the situation tense but honest. The man concludes that the kingdom of Verbania has prepared an exceptional gift. This gives him a sense of unease and a premonition of something important. He realizes that the gift concerns the former princess of the Empire of Kapir and the previous generation of Yumang, Her Highness Liliana. This information becomes pivotal in his thinking. To understand Liliana's story, one must begin with the events that took place 13 years ago. During this period, the kingdom of Verbania borrowed the power of its god to spread a disease. It was an extremely dangerous and deadly disease that was created from a curse. Only the users of Light Murat had any control over it, but even they were barely managing it. This curse was so powerful and difficult to control that it threatened the existence of the entire kingdom. Because of this disease, war broke out between the two kingdoms. The historically complex and strained relationship between Capir and Verbania has always put them on opposite sides of the conflict. The young Duke Morwen, representing the military might of Capir, was sent to the front lines. He led a group of elite warriors determined to protect his kingdom from harm. Morwen was known for his bravery and military strategy, making him a key figure in this war. The newly appointed Emperor Reynold took over the administration of the capital and the maintenance of the kingdom's protective barrier. It was his duty to secure the capital and protect its inhabitants from threat. Under his leadership, the capital remained an invulnerable fortress despite constant attacks and dangers. The powerful Yumang princess, Liliana, fought the disease from within, cleansing the kingdom of all demonic beings. Her magical powers played a key role in fighting the curse. Liliana was not only a princess, but also a symbol of hope for the entire nation. Her actions saved many lives and instilled confidence in the hearts of the people. This war was unpredictable and violent, as the faith of the saints faced the risks posed by the madmen. The confrontation was intense, with each battle resulting in many casualties and suffering. However, despite the hardships, both sides continued to fight, believing in their rightness and justice. On the eve of the final battle, there were calls for peace in the temple. The characters realized that it was time to end this brutal war to prevent further bloodshed. Liliana prepared for the battle, realizing its importance. Her brother, worried about her, asked if she was going to the battlefield because of a wounded man. He was against her participation, believing it was too dangerous for her. He reminded her that if Fyodor fell, the front line would also collapse, with disastrous consequences for the entire kingdom. His words reflected his fear for the future of the kingdom and his family. He did not want to lose his sister. Liliana replied that the Capir dynasty was not only the sword of the country, but also its wings protecting it from all troubles. She emphasized that both aspects, strength and protection, were important, and convinced her brother that the country existed because of its people. Without them, the country has no meaning. Her words were full of determination and confidence. She was not going to back down. She declared that not only was she the princess of this kingdom, but she was the only yumang of this generation, and it was her duty to free the world from evil. Her brother kept asking that if there were other solutions, why should she be the victim? He was filled with doubt and worry for his sister, not understanding her insistence. Liliana, however, was adamant. She said that time was short and asked him not to stop her. Her resolve was unwavering. She knew what she had to do. She left the children in the care of trusted individuals, entrusting them with the care and guidance of the new yumang. She understood the importance of this decision, knowing that her mission might require everything of her. On the eve of the final battle, Duke Morwen stood on the battlefield, realizing that if the situation continued, they would not be able to hold their ground. His face reflected anxiety and tension. His comrade reminded him not to get distracted and to be ready for enemy attacks. The battle was intense and every moment was important. He warned of the dangers of curses that could be placed on the enemy's weapons. Warriors had to be alert and careful to avoid deadly traps. During the battle, the heavens opened and a god appeared. This event shocked everyone involved in the battle and changed the course of the war. The god was a powerful being who inspired fear and terror. His appearance heralded a major change in the battle and the fate of the conflict, adding a new degree of complexity and danger to an already tense situation. Amy, wide-eyed and frightened, watched the scene, her face a mixture of shock and horror. She couldn't understand what the monster in front of her was, and her mind struggled to comprehend the incredible reality unfolding before her eyes. Her heart was pounding as if it were about to jump out of her chest, and her thoughts were confused, unable to find a logical explanation for what was happening. This monster seemed to come out of her worst nightmares, and Amy couldn't look away, paralyzing fear gripping her. The blue-cloaked warrior knelt before the huge creature and realized that it was the deity of the Verban kingdom. He watched his allies prepare for their final battle, realizing that they were the last line of defense for Capir. With a heavy heart, he realized that a great responsibility rested on their shoulders, and their fate depended on the outcome of this battle. The warrior's gaze was steadfast. He knew that even in the face of a deity, one must not retreat. His every movement was filled with determination and the realization that they stood on the brink of a momentous battle. The battle between the humans and the god was beginning, and in the presence of this being, the humans were completely helpless. The warrior felt the entire world plunge into a purple color in the blink of an eye. The sky seemed ominous, and every breath echoed with terror. Men were like ants in the face of the giant, and every blow seemed an unequal battle. He saw his comrades fall one by one and felt hope slowly leaving their hearts. The battle was becoming more and more desperate, and the world around him was falling into chaos. The world turned red with blood, and before the soldiers could breathe, their lives were consumed by the laughter of the worshippers. The place had become an earthly hell, and every corner was saturated with fear and terror. The air was filled with the sounds of pain and despair, and the ground beneath their feet was becoming slippery with the blood of the fallen. The warriors felt the world crumbling around them, and every moment seemed like an eternity. They fought with their last strength, realizing that the hope of salvation was fading with every moment. The warrior with sword in hand gave orders to the remaining warriors, urging them to keep fighting until reinforcements arrived. He knew that the battle would be brutal and incredibly difficult, but they had to endure. Every order he gave was filled with determination and the desperate hope that reinforcements would arrive in time. He could see the fear in his comrades' eyes, but also the spark of courage that kept them from retreating. The war had to be won at all costs, and each warrior knew that the fate of the entire kingdom rested on them. As he looked around, seeing the battlefield cleared of all living things, a sense of hopelessness overwhelmed him. The screams of the abnormal god carried an unwillingness to leave this world. Everything around him reminded him of the losses and sacrifices made for this battle. He felt his heart clench in pain and realized that their efforts might be in vain. Even so, he did not allow himself to lose heart, knowing that even in the darkest moments one must not lose faith. The warrior's squad was all but destroyed. Verban's soldiers fled to avoid being killed by their own god. The warrior felt the irony in this, realizing that even his own god did not spare his followers. He was the only one left who could continue the fight, and that thought gave him strength. He saw his comrades fall one by one, and knew he could not fail those who remained alive. His resolve only grew stronger, and he prepared for the next phase of the battle. With the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, he wondered why he was alone. He couldn't fall, he had to protect this place, waiting for reinforcements. Every moment of waiting was filled with anxiety and fear, but he wouldn't let himself give up. He knew it was his duty to protect his men and the kingdom, and he couldn't let them down at this critical moment. His thoughts were filled with memories of those who had fallen in battle, and he promised himself that he would not let them down. Seeing his comrades die, he struggled with guilt and hatred as he continued to stand his ground. Regardless of what was happening, he remained at his post, not allowing himself to become discouraged. His heart was filled with the bitterness of loss, but he knew he had no right to give up. Every stroke of his sword was filled with determination and fury, and he did not allow himself to think of pain. The warriors continued to fight, knowing that their efforts could save the future of the kingdom. The kidnappers taunted him, asking if he would continue to fight. They accused him of hiding behind the back of a little girl, trying to break his spirit. The warrior clutched his sword, ready for his next move, and would not allow himself to give in to their provocations. He knew he had to keep fighting despite their taunts and threats. His heart was full of determination, and he was willing to give everything for victory. The warrior, though he felt immense pressure, remained steadfast. He urged his comrades to fight, not allowing the darkness to cover the skies of Capir once again. His words were filled with determination and strength, and each warrior knew that they must endure. He did not allow himself to think of fear or pain, knowing that it was their duty to defend the kingdom at all costs. With each swing of his sword, he felt his strength grow, and he was ready for any challenge. After a long battle and severe wounds, Fyodor fell into a coma. When he awoke, he learned that Liliana had disappeared. Bearing a silent longing for many years, he cared for Amy while searching for traces of Liliana. Fyodor felt his heart fill with bitterness and longing, but he wouldn't let himself give up. Each day was filled with the search and the hope that he would find her. The warrior, standing under the starry sky, asked himself if he was truly alone. He prayed to the gods for help, hoping that the day would bring light and change things. His thoughts were filled with memories of the past and hopes for the future, and he wouldn't let himself give up. Every moment was filled with prayers and faith that they could win. With Liliana's support, the situation instantly changed. Yumang used all her strength to finally end the 3-year battle. Both sides suffered huge losses, leading to a period of stagnation between the two kingdoms. Liliana became a symbol of hope and strength, her actions inspiring everyone around her. Years later, still striving to find Liliana, Fyodor continued to search for answers. Then one day he saw her eye, reminding him that they had once been close. That moment gave him back hope and determination, and he knew he wouldn't stop until he finally found her. He approached his interlocutor, his face contorted in a wry smile, and stated that he had come to kindly offer the remains of the princess of their kingdom. His eyes read gloating confidence. He was savoring the moment. In response to his words, his interlocutor stared at him in amazement and wariness, trying to realize if he really dared to bring such news. Then, after hesitating for a moment, he asked with a chuckle why he wanted to talk on such cruel terms. His voice was filled with mockery, as if he was mocking his interlocutor. He was enjoying his power and superiority in this situation. His interlocutor could hardly contain his rage, his face reddened with anger, but he could not allow himself to lose control. He wondered if it was because he had been away from the battlefield for a long time. A shadow of doubt appeared in his eyes, but he quickly chased it away, regaining his confidence. He reminded himself that his place on the battlefield was more important than anything else, that he couldn't afford to be weak. His companion, watching him, felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps he wasn't as strong as he appeared. Memories came flooding back to him, and he tried to remember who he was. He remembered his battles, his comrades, his mission. Images of battles flashed through his mind, blood and death surrounding him. He clenched his fists, trying to banish those images and focus on his task again. His companion watched his inner struggle, his face expressing a mixture of anxiety and wariness. Elsewhere, they were discussing his actions and how insidious they were. They condemned him, calling him a traitor and a villain. Their voices were full of rage and hatred. They could not believe that he had dared to take such a step. They recognized that he knew that what they were doing would make them angry, but he went ahead with it anyway. Their discussion was filled with threats and plans for revenge. They also thought that the Verban kingdom was crazy for sending this man on such a dangerous mission. They didn't understand how they could trust him with such an important task. They discussed his past actions, remembering how he had already betrayed their trust. Their voices grew louder and louder, their anger growing by the minute. They were ready for decisive action. They thought that if it went on like this, Fyodor might actually get rid of him. Their fear and anxiety were becoming more and more palpable. They realized that the situation was getting out of control. They couldn't believe that Fyodor, their once staunch ally, could go to such extremes. They wondered if no one would stop him. Their anxiety grew and they looked for ways to solve the problem. He apologized for interrupting the conversation. His voice was full of respect and humility. He realized that he had interrupted an important discussion and tried to show his politeness. His companions looked at him in surprise, their expressions softening. They had not expected such behavior from him. His apology reassured them, and they allowed him to continue. He thought of his mother's object, which was still in that man's possession. His heart clenched with pain and nostalgia. He remembered how his mother had treasured that object, how she had always carried it with her. Now this object was in the hands of his enemy. His eyes filled with tears, but he blinked quickly, chasing them away. He couldn't allow himself to be weak at this moment. He had to get back what belonged to his mother. He raised his staff and said that he sincerely hoped they would accept the gift. His voice was full of confidence and determination. He knew that this gift could change the course of events. His companions looked at him intently, their faces expressing a mixture of surprise and disbelief. They couldn't believe he was actually offering them such a gift. He hoped they would accept his offer and stop the bloodshed. He reported that when he touched the woman's remains, a chain formed, indicating that he was the new yumang. His voice was full of triumph and pride. He knew that this event would change everything. His interlocutors looked at each other in amazement. They couldn't believe that he had become the new yumang. This meant that he now had great power and responsibility. They realized that things would be different now. He ordered the good news to be delivered. His voice was firm and determined. He knew that this news would bring joy and hope to his people. His messengers nodded and hurried to carry out his orders. He watched them go, his heart full of pride and satisfaction. He knew he had made the right choice. His people needed to know of his new status and power. Elsewhere, upon awakening, he marveled and said he would give them another chance. His voice was full of weariness and disappointment. He couldn't believe it had started again. His eyes were full of pain and sadness. He looked at his companions, his heart clenched with guilt. He knew he had to give them another chance. He couldn't afford to be cruel and ruthless. She closed the book and said it was a sad ending, but hoped this time the ending would be more satisfying. Her voice was quiet and melancholy. She felt that her strength was running out. Her eyes were full of sadness and weariness. She knew that she must continue to fight in spite of all the difficulties. She hoped that this time would be different. Her heart was full of hope and determination.